want to shout because I don't want to disrupt all the diners too loud, but I'll shout. The original place was over there that we were going to do this, but it turns out that's the exit for Accelerator now, and so we can't do all of that. But welcome to the Parks and Cons crew night here at Knott's Scary Farm. I'm going to keep this very brief because I know everybody's got a lot to do tonight, but I thank you for hanging out for a little bit. In 2020, when we did the virtual walk in the parks for Parks and Cons online, because we couldn't go anywhere at that time. Everything was shut down. Fast forward to when things open up, Parks and Cons starts doing their crew night here at Knott's Scary Farm. We're like, hey, well, let's actually do some physical walk in the parks and learn about some of the historic, relevant places here at Knott's Scary Farm. We've done that for 2 years. I've dragged you all throughout the park. We're not doing that tonight. We're going to just stay right here, and we're going to just make it simple and talk about one very important location that's right near us that had a huge role in the growth of Knott's Scary Farm. We're here in the Boardwalk area. The Boardwalk was originally the Roaring Twenties area, which started, it opened in 1975, started over kind of by the bumper cars where the train tracks are, went all the way up to here where the parachutes were and where the sky cabin still is. It wasn't until the following year, 1976, that construction was completed for the Roaring Twenties airfield, which filled up this whole area. Both of those areas combined make up the Boardwalk. And when the Roaring Twenties airfield opened, it contained a very important venue in the world of Knott's Scary Farm. That venue is still right here on the other side of this building. It was originally named the Cloud9 Ballroom. It is now known as the Boardwalk Ballroom. And from the get-go, Knott's Berry Farm started using the Cloud9 Ballroom as a venue for Knott's Scary Farm. 1976, the first show housed in there for Scary Farm was named The Monsters of the Mind and the Unaware. And it starred Frankenstein's monster, his bride, a vampire bride, the mummy, and the headless horseman. It was a short little 15-minute show that featured the monsters in vignettes dancing. Speaking of dancing, for the rest of the 1970s, several venues around here at Knott's Scary Farm contained disco dancing because disco was so popular at the time, and the Cloud9 Ballroom was no different. It had the Disco Wizard as the DJ, having all these people guests disco dancing. But when we get into the 1980s and the 1990s for the Cloud9 Ballroom, it went to more of a traditional kind of a venue for standard kind of shows, variety shows, things, and some very important performers, people like magician Ed Alonzo, the Misfit of Magic, who would go on to headline all of Knott's Scary Farm many years later. Other people like Zamora, the Torture King, who performed the most years at Knott's Scary Farm than any other performer, aside from Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. By 1997, the Cloud9 Ballroom name was completely erased, and it was changed to the New Wave Theater. But that was short-lived. It only lasted 3 years, and then it became the Boardwalk Ballroom in 2001. Fast forward several years later, the last show housed inside the Boardwalk Ballroom for Knott's Scary Farm was named Tonga Tiki Terror. And then from that point on, it was used as a venue for attractions. The first attraction housed inside the Boardwalk Ballroom for Knott's Scary Farm was a returning attraction for its second year named Trapped. Did anybody ever get to do Trapped? Okay. In its second year, it was the full name of the attraction was Trapped, the New Experiment. Then it returned the following year, 2014, same location, and it was Trapped, Lock and Key. And so Trapped was a kind of a unique experience for Knott's Scary Farm. It was time ticketed. It was upcharged. It was a mix between immersive theater and horror escape room, and very innovative for Scary Farm. So now that enough time has passed, we can look back and see how revolutionary Trapped was for Knott's Scary Farm, because it led to heavily immersive experiences like Infected, where guests interacted with raging zombies and guests shot at them with laser tag blasters. It also led to things like the skeleton key rooms, which were heavily immersive narrative extensions to a handful of select mazes, and was all tied to the newly introduced Fright Lane, front of the line access pass. And then for a period, the skeleton key rooms were like their own standalone miniature scare experiences. Following Trapped inside the Boardwalk Ballroom, 2015, 2016, a traditional maze was there named Dead of Winter. It was very short-lived, only lasted 2 seasons. Most Knott's Scary Farm mazes last about 5 seasons, but Dead of Winter was not well received. The guests did not connect with it, and so it was removed only after a couple of years. But its second year, 2016, Dead of Winter shared the Boardwalk Ballroom with another specialized attraction named Fear VR. Fear VR was the first virtual reality 4D virtual reality horror experience at a major theme park. I directed Fear VR and co-wrote it with industry designer John Cook, and worked very closely with a company named Hollow Studios, who produced the VR content, and we worked closely with the Knott's Berry Farm teams to put it all together. And if we think Dead of Winter was short-lived after 2 years, Fear VR had that beat by a mile, because it lasted only 1 weekend because of complaints from people who felt that VR content was offensive to the mental health community. And so it got immediately shut down. We weren't setting out to offend anybody or anything, and a lot of people really worked hard on it, but that's the way that cookie crumbled. And so Fear VR, Dead of Winter were replaced in 2017 by fan favorite Dark Ride. Did everybody go through Dark Ride? People like Dark Ride? Yes. And that lasted a very long time, all the way to 2022. It was actually packed up here at Knott's and shipped to Canada's Wonderland, where it is operating still to this day. So it's nice that it kind of lives on. Dark Ride was designed by my friend John Cook, and I remember he was quoted in the Orange County Register in response to the opening of Dark Ride, and he said something, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but the idea when he proposed the idea of a theme park dark ride attraction kind of maze that's under attack by killers or a killer, the Knott's team he was pitching this to all had the same reaction. How have we not done this before? It's like a no-brainer. However, they were mistaken. They had done this before. 1994, 1995, the Kingdom of the Dinosaurs ride had an overlay for Knott's Scary Farm that was about a theme park dark ride attraction under attack by a killer. And that attraction was named Slasher of the Dark. And that leads us to the current attraction inside the Boardwalk Ballroom named Cinema Slasher. I conceptualized that maze with industry designer John Cook. I wrote it, he designed it. We worked very closely with Dan Miller, who was the art director assigned to the project. And the idea behind Cinema Slasher is we go inside this kind of ominous movie theater that's proudly hosting its Trio of Terror Film Festival. All 3 horror movies in this film festival feature the most famous horror movie villain of all time, named Slasher of the Dark. And the only problem with all of this is that movie theater burned down 51 years ago tonight, and it has now reappeared, and that's what we're stepping into. Those 3 movies, those 3 horror movies, contain tons of nods to Knott's Scary Farm's past attractions, but it also has a lot of typical kind of horror movie tropes. The first movie we walk into is named Trick or Treat, and that's a huge nod to like the 1970s slasher movies of like John Carpenter's Halloween and Black Christmas, that kind of stuff. The second movie we go into is Camp Gonna Getcha. That's a nod to the 1980s summer camp slashers of like Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees and that kind of thing. And the third movie that we go into is Slaughterhouse, and that's more of a nod to the more modern, super gory movies like Saw and Hostel and that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, we're attacked by different variants of the slasher, and we're weaving in and out of these movies going through this haunted movie theater. And so when we approach this theater from the outside, it looks kind of fine, it looks normal. And by the way, this we're able to see a sculpture this year of the slasher who wasn't there last year. Knott's Berry Farm ran out of bandwidth to actually get it installed, but it was ultimately created last year, but they ran out of time. But if you look at this concept art on my t-shirt, the slasher was actually on top of the marquee. So thankfully it's there now. And so we go into this kind of nice theater and we go into this nice lobby, but it starts to glitch. And we're able to see when it glitches the true burned down nature of this rubbled movie theater, because we're seeing that haunting, and the further we progress through the attraction, the more that haunting manifests itself and attaches itself to inanimate objects inside the theater. So that's why we see things like the camera creature and the popcorn monster and the big boss at the end of like the big skull creature made out of film strips. So it was very important for us to kind of keep the theater almost as its own character. But that was not always the case. For a long time in the development, it wasn't about the theater, it was about the theater owner who was going to progressively be getting worse. But as we were writing this out and kind of designing things, it was getting convoluted. We already had this villain, we already had our protagonist with these variants of the slasher. This theater owner was just kind of muddying the water, so we needed to simplify it and said, well, let's step back and make the theater its own character. And we were inspired by things like the original movie of The Haunting and the book by Shirley Jackson, which is a great thing, where it's a haunted house and the house is its own character. And so we really kind of aimed for that type of vibe, and it seems to have worked well in our favor, because anytime you're going through one of these attractions and things are confusing and convoluted, you don't understand what's happening, it's usually because the designer or the writer or whoever has lost touch in what it takes to entertain these guests for these types of experiences, because we can't have a lot of long-winded exposition, because we got to get thousands and thousands and thousands of guests through these attractions on a nightly basis. So we need to make everything easily digestible and really kind of streamlined. But if we think about cinema slasher and what it is today, and we think back all the way to the Monsters of the Mind and the Unaware in 1976 in the Cloud9 Ballroom, we could see that that venue that's still standing, now known as the Boardwalk Ballroom, has played a huge role in the history of Knott's Scary Farm. So that's all I have. Thank you so much. Go enjoy cinema slasher. Thanks everybody. Thanks Parks and Con.